Welcome, it's Debrup on Air. I'm your host Debrup Laha, and this is The International Lens, where we dive into the real life stories of international students in the US. I have been in your shoes, earning both my bachelor's and master's degrees here, and now I'm working full time in the States. This podcast series is for you, whether you're already studying in the US or just planning to. Every week, I'll bring you conversations with students from all over the world, sharing their journeys, challenges, and triumphs. My mission? It's to give you the insights and inspirations you need as you carve your own path in the US. So, whether you're dreaming of studying here or already on your journey, this podcast is your ultimate guide. Tune in and let's make your American adventure one to remember. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the International Lens. For today's episode, we are joined by Miss Maria Khalil, who is a food science graduate and currently works as a food safety specialist in one of the leading restaurant chains in the US. So we are very grateful for people like Maria because she and others in the same field ensure that what we eat every day is not just delicious, but also very safe. So today we want to explore her journey, the science behind food safety, and what it is exactly like working behind the scenes in the restaurant industry. Welcome, Maria, to this special episode of Food Science. It's the first of its kind where I'm hosting somebody from a food science background. How are you doing?
That's exciting. Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great, productive day and ending it with a nice conversation and very happy to be here.
Great. I've been willing to talk to you for a long time, and I was wondering when is the right time to invite you for our podcast because food science, as we know, we all love to eat, but nobody really knows what goes behind the scenes. So that's why I thought it might be a great conversation to bring in front of people and also the field and what exactly is associated in the courses. So before we get started, could you give us a little bit of your background of educational qualifications and about yourself?
Absolutely. So as a food scientist, I pursued my bachelor's degree in food science and management, and this was back home in Lebanon. And it was a really good program because they did integrate business courses in it. I really thought that was a very key moment for me and key realization of, oh, it's not just the science of food. You need to also integrate it into the larger system, which is where business comes in. And then you go into the supply chain and the logistics of it. So we barely scratched the surface in the bachelor's program to me, and it was just such an interesting field that I decided to move to the United States and pursue my master's in food science at Chapman, which I did. And this was back in Orange County. And Chapman University has still a great program. It's a joint master's in food science and MBA. And it naturally makes sense, right? You can't really have food without supply chain, without logistics, without operations. And all of that is influenced in the world of business, especially in a country like the United States. So I tacked that on, and I also decided to pursue the MBA at once. And that's the educational background. Of course, we do have certifications we need to take, especially if entering the workforce. And we can talk a little bit about those certifications more, but there's food safety specific ones that you would need to have. And so we got all that on the resume and we started job hunting, and that was the OPT period. So of course, you know what that's like. And yeah, got headhunted by Jack in the Box, moved to San Diego, and been with the company for almost 5 years now.
Great. So you've been in California ever since you came to the US.
That's true.
How is it like in the West Coast?
Honestly, it's sunny and nice. We enjoy the weather very much here. I have a lot of friends in Canada and West Coast or East Coast, and I hear the stories of the weather, so I can't complain. The sunshine does help. And quite honestly, San Diego is a really nice city to live in. It's very vibrant, it's very active, very young, and lots of opportunities for growth depending on the industry. So I definitely lucked out there with Jack in the Box bringing me out here.
Right. I've always heard great things about San Diego in particular amongst all the cities in California. And for some reason, every time I talk to people, they tend to say San Diego is probably one of the best places to live in California as well. And a
It's a good
fun
one.
fact, and there is also a fun fact that people in California often say that they pay the higher taxes for the weather. So
Oh
I
yeah,
can understand. Yeah.
we can attest to that, yes. But it's nice when I see my friends stuck in the snow, they can't get out, and I'm out here in the sun in nature. It really is a nice perk. It's a nice benefit. But yeah, the cost comes with it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you mentioned that for your program, you did your master's in food science and you also pursued an MBA. Do you think both the degrees helped you simultaneously for your career growth, or did one play a superior role over the other?
I think the combination of both was very powerful for me personally. I've seen a lot of folks do amazing things with a master's in food science degree. I wouldn't say you necessarily need additional education there, but for me personally, it was mostly a choice to expand the network and expand the skill set in different industries as much as I
Mhm.
could. And then taking on that little bit of a business side helped me be ready for a corporate environment from a project management perspective, from just an efficiency perspective, gap analysis. And then eventually you do want to understand how food science can contribute to the bottom line. And it's just much more, it's much easier to make the connection and to be able to sell food safety when you know how it can help you either save
Mhm.
time or save money and or both. So I think it was definitely an advantage, and it helped me because you know how it is for international students. We only have a little bit of time to find a job,
Right.
and I understood the power of connections and networking early on. So I told myself, you know what, let's invest a little bit more time and get the second degree. And at the same time, get to know different industries, get to know more people. And ultimately, it was my network that helped me land the job. So I
Mhm.
can I can confidently say it worked for me. And I always am a proponent of continuous learning. So even if it's not in the form of a degree,
Mhm.
I just value the concept of seeking knowledge.
Great. I mean, you mentioned quite a few great points there, and we'll dive more into the career, like the job aspect of it. But before that, I mean, you told a little bit about the program of the MBA, which had supply chain and also project management and stuff. How were the courses like for a food science degree? What were some of the courses that were there?
I will admit the courses were some of the most interesting I've taken. And I think I made it more interesting in my head too, because I would challenge myself to apply it to our field, because I noticed a
Mhm.
lot of the examples provided were more about the tech space and, the typical real estate and the markets, which is all fantastic to learn. I was there from the mindset of how can I use that in the food industry?
Mhm.
So I think it was very powerful from the sense that it really gave the idea of how complex it is, the business of making money. And if you're aiming to work for a corporation, which I was, because you need sponsorship,
Mhm.
so you want
Yep.
to be able to go with a player who is able to support you in that manner. I figured, this is going to be an advantage for sure to understand the implications to the business as a whole. Because sometimes, you're not talking to a team member who's flipping burgers. You are talking to a franchise operator who's interested in
Mhm.
earning money for their livelihood, for their family. So we need to be able to understand all aspects of the business in order to best support. If we come in just from one small lens, it's harder to get traction and to get folks to really tune into the safety aspect.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. And while you were pursuing your master's, did you do any internships in the industry, or did you come straight to for a full-time role?
Did I come straight to what? Excuse me.
Did you come directly for a full-time role after your master's, or did you also pursue any internships while you were a student?
I did pursue internships during both of my graduate programs. For the
Okay.
majority of the food science portion, it was tailored towards food safety because that was the niche I was choosing to focus on as a specialization. So I had the chance to do food safety and quality assurance internships for mostly consumer packaged goods. So a little bit different than operational and restaurant food
Mm-hmm.
safety. But still, you learn a lot and you get attuned to understanding regulations and how those impact different operations because it really depends on the product and what you're trying to manufacture. And then when I transitioned into the majority MBA portion, I did make a mindful decision of also pursuing non-food safety internships just to round out my resume. So I had the chance to do a sales internship also for a consumer packaged good company. And that was also very eye-opening. And I think that's what helped me the most in understanding corporate relationships, suppliers, and being able to speak to different stakeholders. That was a good exposure back then.
So for both the internships, you had a complete overview of the science as well as the business side of things. Right. I mean, I think it was a great decision that you took to pursue the master's as well as the MBA because that gave you an overall picture of how the industry runs. Because when we pursue just a master's degree in engineering or any other field, we just focus on that aspect and not always
Yeah.
we get to understand the business side of things. So that is good to know. And if you had to summarize in a high level, what were some key things you learned during these internships?
Well, I think for food safety, I learned that food safety is often not as clear-cut as you would think.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from a country like Lebanon, where, we are solid on food safety, the restaurant business industry there is booming and always has been. But it's quite different the way we look at regulations. The United States is a little bit more structured and more rigid. And despite this structure and rigidity, you find that it's very easy to fall into either inefficiencies or lack of training at all levels of
Mm-hmm.
organizations as it relates specifically to food safety. So it really stresses the importance of having a team who's not only up to date on regulations, but who also understands the power of strategic planning and knowing where to focus your efforts because food safety is really large initiatives and you really need to think of it from a risk-based perspective in order
Makes
to make those
sense.
decisions. And then on the MBA side, I think for the sales administration, that was mostly understanding the numbers game and mostly getting attuned with translating knowledge to leadership and to stakeholders in a way that they can digest and understand. So I think that was also powerful.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. And so currently, since you're working in the industry for what, more than 5 years now, right? How do you think,
Almost 5 years.
almost 5 years? Okay, so how do you think your role has transitioned from a junior's food safety specialist to your current role in 5 years? And how is your day-to-day work like?
Great question. It has transitioned immensely. Looking back at the last 4 years and a half, it's almost like a roller coaster. And I think that was a very unique experience in that when I first joined Jack in the Box, it was a brand new team. So we had a very unique opportunity to really just look at everything and set up a strategy and push it from there. So it was really nice because we all naturally grew our careers with the brand on the team. So I think that was just a matter of very nice timing and lucky timing with overlap of organizational opportunities. And then, a couple of years later, as I was naturally growing through my role and getting more skills that could impact really our level of risk for the brand, then we got Del Taco on board, and that shifted everything once more because we had to standardize and we had to make sure that we were covering risk for both brands. So quite challenging, I will admit, all positively challenging. I think it was a great opportunity for the team to really button up policies and make sure that everything is ready to go for another brand to join. So a roller coaster, positively challenging. And my current day-to-day, I mean, how much we rescheduled this. So it's been busy, but all good. It's always great to be busy. And I think now after 4.5 years, we're at a stage of building and innovating and growing rather than just getting to know the brand and setting up the basic systems and processes. So it's a really nice creative time for the team. Lots of work ahead, but exciting times.
Interesting. And you mentioned about the acquisition of Del Taco, you said, right? Which was acquired
Correct.
by Jack in the Box. So there must be lots of regulations which were also in place, which you also had to take into consideration.
Absolutely. And that's applicable to both brands at all times. I just think the lens that we had to take was what are some processes that this new brand has that our
Mm-hmm.
current brand doesn't have procedures for? Because both brands do things a little bit differently in the kitchens. So we had to really hone in on the processes, the steps, and understand where we need to step in and put in some guardrails to make sure that risk is at an acceptable level, and also to standardize both programs.
Understood. Okay. So going back a few years, if you were to give some inputs to a student about how to crack interviews for internship roles or entry-level roles in as a food safety specialist, what would those be? Or how is the interview process like for such roles?
I am a big fan of the concept of transferable skills,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're a recent grad or even when you're still in undergrad, but all the way up through grad school. Transferable skills truly are can be any skill. So for me, learning about that concept helped me grab some experience that I got from something completely unrelated, for example,
Mm-hmm.
the sales administration internship, and use that in my interviews when I was job hunting for a full-time job. Because for me, the challenge was coming from Lebanon, which you might know there aren't as many opportunities for internships and structures of that sort. To me, the concept of an internship was quite new when I came to the United States in the way that it's sold here. Um, so coming from that background and not having that exposure meant that in some areas I was a little bit on the back foot of how much I had on my resume. So I figured, let me get the opportunities that I can. And for those that weren't in the food safety industry, then let me try to pull from them. What did I learn that I can apply in this role that I'm interested in? So my biggest tip is focusing on skills, not
Okay.
focusing on necessarily any specific type of industry unless you are passionate about one. But really, when building your resume, when building your pitch and thinking through how to perform on an interview, it really is just a matter of tell me your experience. How did it go? And what did you learn? Because that's what really shows what a candidate can do, is their ability to learn from the situations they're in and adapt and then come up with a plan or a strategy moving forward in whatever environment you're put in. And I know a lot of us use our work skills in life and vice versa.
Right. Yep.
So it's positive all around.
So I guess one important thing to note is you define the problem and how you resolve or how you come to a result or what steps you took in the process and what skills you used in the process is definitely helpful when you're applying for internships and full-time roles for every student. Okay, good to know that. And you said you did your master's at Chapman University in California. So any elective courses you suggest which students should take when they're pursuing their master's, which is going to be very helpful?
Yes, absolutely. On the food science side, sensory was very interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
think sensory science, which is essentially essentially food tasting, but that's me very
Right.
much simplifying it. There's a whole process and structure to it on how you select panelists, on how you assess. There's a hedonic scale that's used. So I just personally was very intrigued by it, not because of any benefit it added to my resume necessarily, but because, taste profiles are different and different
Right.
people experience taste different ways. And me coming again from a different country, I made a horrible panelist, which is what I learned that I wouldn't be a good sensory scientist in the United States. So that was interesting because I was exploring that for a while as well. So that was a good learning. That was a fun class, but honestly, the program has amazing classes, and the electives are always interesting because it's literally what you see in supermarkets every day, just
Right.
explained to you from the back end, from how you actually get it to the shelf. Product development was a powerful one too. And I think it prepared me for my job today but product development wasn't an elective, but still worth mentioning because it helps you understand the commercialization aspect of a product before it gets to the supply chain itself. So that was interesting too, because that process also involves, a P&L. So you have to run your numbers, you have to make sure you're profitable, your margins are good, and you're doing that as you're developing in the kitchen and
Hmm.
calculating the cost of certain ingredients, how much you weigh, how much you put in there. So that was fascinating as well. On the MBA side, personally, I enjoyed branding very much. And the course was interesting in that it was split in, personal branding. There was a little portion on personal branding, and then there was, business branding for the sake of a product or a service. And I don't think you can do one without the other, because at the end of the day, it's humans working with humans. So it's
Right.
powerful to also think through, what is my brand? What am I bringing to the table? And then letting that show through your work consistently. I think that was a good learning from that course.
Okay. And just curious, were there any courses related to manufacturing, since manufacturing is an important aspect in any food industry? So, were there anything that was there, or?
I wouldn't say there was one manufacturing course per se, but all of our courses have an element discussing manufacturing because it's just woven into the processes. So in short, yes, there absolutely is courses on manufacturing, but yeah, we usually take every course holistically. We don't only look at the niche in of itself, but we always end up zooming out as to how does this fit into the business model as a whole.
Mhm.
And manufacturing plays a big part of that. I'll never forget my food engineering class. You're an engineer, so you can appreciate. We've taken food engineering classes, and I'll tell you that was my most challenging one because duh, we're not engineers. But it was very interesting to study it from that perspective, and definitely the most challenging class I've done.
And what was challenging about food engineering? Because I have never taken food engineering. It might be challenging for all other engineers as well.
And they are very basic, they're heat transfer, mass transfer. So it's
Okay.
not necessarily highly complex scenarios maybe for you to understand, but for us at the time, engineering was completely new. And so in the way that we studied it back then was, for example, milk needs to be pasteurized. For it to be safe to drink, you got to pasteurize it. And that usually
Hmm.
happens by you flowing the milk through a long pipe. And so you need to understand, okay, if I need to pasteurize it at this temperature for this amount of time, how powerful does my pump need to be? What's the throughput? How long is it going to spend how do you validate it? Complex, I'll tell you this, but it was very fun. If it wasn't related to grades, it would be much more entertaining. It was a little stressful at some points, but yeah, it was really interesting to see that it's all about physics too. So that goes into your manufacturing question. So that was good exposure. Interestingly, I did that in my bachelor's back home, and
Hmm.
never in the United States have I seen a program with food engineering. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when you explained the scenario, it reminded me of fluid mechanics and heat transfer. So I guess
Yeah.
there's some sort of similarity, and so for a food science master's program, did you see most of your batchmates were coming from food science background only, or were there students from other field as well?
To be honest, I was one of the few who came from a food science background. So a lot of folks came from chemistry, biology. We've even had a few pre-med folks, which I
Hmm.
thought was really interesting. So they were doing an MS, and that MS in food science was helping them in their med school applications. Very interesting crossover. So there were all kinds, and Chapman's program was unique in that it was majority international. This is where I was very blessed and very lucky. Because again, you know how it is. It's easier to acclimate when you're surrounded by other international students who are literally going through the same thing. So I'm grateful that my program was mostly diverse and from diverse backgrounds, because then it it really made the classes more rich. Each person was bringing in their own perspectives. And at the grad level, the discussions happen in classes. It's not just a lecture format. So that was a very enriching experience for sure.
Okay, and since you mentioned about international students, what are some of the jobs available in the industry for a food science student as an international student in the US?
So many, so many. It really depends on the niche you choose. So personally, I went into food safety, but research and development is a big one. So product development goes into that. You've also got your folks who are passionate about sales, and then they just
Mm-hmm.
tailor that experience to consumer goods, which is always a fascinating thing to me. It helps when you have the technicality of it, right? The formulation of the product, what makes it better, what makes the service better. Even if we're thinking through, equipment, because you can apply it to so many things in the food industry. And then, I do know a few people who went all the way and became, flavor scientists. And that's
Interesting.
an 8, 9 year journey, where you have to get hyper specialized, and it's a very, very how do you say, exclusive field. It's quite difficult to get into those institutions that produce sensory scientists. So that's another arena. But this is as far as careers in general. I think those are the ones that pop out the most to me out here in SoCal. Obviously, food safety is everywhere, so that's going to be underlying any operation. But then as far as internships, I think food safety and R&D do exist quite commonly. I know a lot of companies like to bring in fresh students, especially those undergoing grad programs, because they're bringing in the science and the knowledge with them. And that's very valuable when you're formulating, because you're up to date on research, you're up to date on peer-reviewed journals. So you can bring in that fresh knowledge to the organization. It's really all about what you bring to the table and how you can add value to the company. So there's lots of opportunity, especially in Southern California. It's a known hub for food science.
Yeah, it's good to know because in every other field, they mostly prefer work experience over the knowledge we learn in grad school. So it's good to know that food science job, there's at least a lot more weightage given to what you're learning in grad school, and that is something encouraging for students as they want to progress and want to explore this field. And a couple of quick questions. So you joined in the industry in about 2020 or so, 2020, 2021, COVID era, and now we are 5 years down the line. So do you see there is any extra skills required to excel now with the integration of artificial intelligence or even automation?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a novel field in a sense, in that industries are now catching up to incorporating it in their roles and in their jobs. I would say in the food industry, automation is definitely a big one, and I'm sure they're leveraging machine learning brilliantly to execute even better operations on the manufacturing side. Personally, I don't have a lot of visibility to that, but I can speak a little bit to the restaurant food safety side. There are automation innovations as well. Jack in the Box is actually testing Flippy, which is like a fryer robot. So that is meant to cut down on labor and support stores, especially in high throughput times, and those day parts where it gets really busy in the drive-through. So that's been an interesting project to work on for sure.
Mhm.
Not without its challenges, like anything new any brand is adopting. But it's great that restaurant food safety are involved in the project. That way we can all collaborate and make sure we're producing cool fries that were fried by a robot, but that are also safe to consume for our consumer. And on the data analysis side of things, I would say, the industry is not necessarily there yet in the way that it collects information from health departments, for example, on the performance, because it's very varied there. Each health department has their own form and their own way of sharing the results of the inspections. So
Mhm.
normalizing that data has been a challenge, and I think this is where AI could support those efforts with the ultimate goal and lens of getting to a predictive space of trying to understand which stores might need more support than others and how can we jump in before there's a risk to the brand or the consumer. So yeah, it's quite the novel introduction. We're starting to see it pop up more in industry conferences tailored to food safety as well. So the industry is on it, and I look forward to seeing it develop and to see what we can apply.
Interesting. So fries made by robots. Can we call them robotic fries? Don't know.
You can, if that appeals to you more.
Yeah, I mean, on a fun fact, recently I did a tour at Purdue University, and while I was doing a
Mm.
campus tour, I saw there were some robots which were delivering coffee from one of the cafes to all the students. And I was like, wow, I mean, that's also
Wow.
shortage of labor. Like instead of somebody
Mhm.
delivering from Uber Eats or Grubhub, it was a robot which was delivering the coffee. So that was quite interesting to see. Yeah, and one other
Definitely in the
question.
future.
Yep, definitely. Like, I think automation is taking an important role in many industries, and we are going to see more of automation and less of human tool. I guess we'll still need to have humans in all work to take the decisions, but probably to automate things and make things run a little faster, robots will definitely be helpful to some extent.
Absolutely. With the right guardrails,
Absolutely.
the right process, and the right oversight, absolutely, yes. But I wouldn't trust AI to run the world just yet.
No, definitely not. Like, I don't think anybody would feel it's safe if AI is running the world at the current stage with so much happening and it's still in testing phase. So definitely
Yeah,
not the greatest time to rely completely. And
we can
so,
revisit that next time.
yeah, absolutely. In a few years, we'll see how it goes. So yeah, before we conclude, do you suggest that students who are coming to pursue their masters, should they brush up anything if they want to pursue their masters in food science?
I would say no matter what you're pursuing, if you're interested in coming to the United States, first and foremost, consider your lifestyle and how it fits to the place that you're going. The United
Mhm.
States is very vast, very different. It's funny you mentioned Purdue. I almost went to Purdue. The reason I chose Chapman, to be quite honest with you, because Purdue is a solid institution, so is Chapman University. However, it was my auntie who made me realize, Maria, it's about where you live and what you're going to be
Yeah.
able to do. And knowing myself, I would not have enjoyed life in Purdue. I would have maybe enjoyed the program. It's a brilliant program, but I wouldn't have enjoyed the lifestyle in general. So I would say number one, if you can, if you're blessed with the option, try your best to be intentional about which area you're choosing to go to and try to
Mhm.
research what that looks like. Um, Second, very important, I would research laws and regulations that apply to us, what our rights are and what our requirements are. How can we navigate smoothly in a new country is knowing the country and understanding what system we're going into. But then specifically for food science folks and anybody interested in pursuing that higher ed, it's the United States is a very powerful place to do it. The food and beverage industry is a massive one out here, one of the
Mhm.
most powerful ones, and it runs no matter what. People need to eat. During COVID, you have job security because you are essential to the operations of an
Absolutely.
organization that is trying to feed somebody. So that was an additional advantage for me that made me feel a little bit safer during that time because I know that it was a difficult time. A lot of people were unfortunately laid off and had to lose their jobs. So that was also a component for me choosing that degree is the stability component. So I have my parents to thank for that advice. I'll give them kudos. They really tried to instill in me, try to do something important. And so that's what appealed to me in food science because it was important, but it was still fun. It's food. So I highly recommend just dipping into this field a little bit for those who aren't familiar. You can join at any time. I remember we had people in our grad program who were married with a whole family and then who just
Yeah.
wanted a career pivot and chose something they're passionate about and found it in food science. So never too late and a brilliant field. And I'm a resource for anyone interested. Not only do I support internationals, but anybody interested in the science of food and food safety, we can nerd out together.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think after watching this episode, a lot of students will definitely reach out to you to learn more about this space because it's a very interesting phase and it's not a widely spoken field. Like most of the people these days talk mostly about computer science and engineering, maybe to some extent law, but not a lot of people talk about food science. So definitely it's an important area because we need to survive on food. That's the only thing we need to
Mhm.
survive on. So yeah, before we end, people would hate me if I don't ask you this question, but what is your favorite cuisine? And please be
Oh,
honest.
you can't ask a Lebanese woman that because she's gonna say Lebanese. However, if it's non-Lebanese, I'm a sucker for Italian food,
Okay.
specifically Sicilian cuisine, which is quite hopping in San Diego, so can't complain about that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think all the international cuisines are definitely very like tasty is what I can say for all of us who are coming from the other side of the world. And sometimes what I feel the food in the US is very mild. Like even if you ask them to make it spicy, it's still so mild.
Yeah,
So that's
I
where
get
I feel
you. I get you. You know, for us, Lebanese spices are actually a little bit on the sweeter side. But you know, meeting international students, eventually you're gonna try different cuisines. And
absolutely.
I realize I learned two things. I love spice. I have no tolerance for spice. So I started practicing year over year to add in the spice. And then I reached a level where I now feel what you're saying, which is where's the flavor? Where is it? So yeah, I think it's just different flavors. It's really cool to see the different cuisines now becoming a little fusion. I love seeing American Lebanese cuisine. I love seeing, you know, Chinese American cuisine. Some people might have opinions about that, but for me, I think it's just a testament to how this country works. I love fusion cuisines and I'm a foodie. So that's the flavor seeking never ends.
Great. Great, Maria. Thank you very much for your time today. It was lovely speaking with you.
Okay.
And I look forward to speaking with you in a future episode once more.
Sounds good. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Got questions or suggestions? Drop me an email at daybrouponair@gmail.com. Catch you in the next episode. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.